So, thrilled to have Jerry Palmer as our guest today. She's a community psychologist with extensive experience as a practitioner. She is the co-founder and managing director of Community Wellness Institute, where the basis of a lot of their work is on FACE, an acronym for the values of fairness, awareness, compassion, and excellence. She's an adjunct at Adler. She was past chair of CIRA, and she got her degree at National Louis. So I'm going to turn it over to her. She's going to present, then we're going to have time for questions and answers, and we'll use the hour well. So welcome all.
Okay. Yes.
And Jerry, it's all yours.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Hi to everybody. Great to see faces. I see you on the email threads that have been really long lately, I would say within the past 30 days. But hopefully we are moving towards a most productive and unifying time, and we shall definitely see what happens with that later. So I do have some slides. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully that will all turn up well. But if nothing else, if not, we will keep it moving, because one of the things we know we don't have control of most of the time, and that's technology. So we will hopefully see that this will do what we want it to do. So, okay, I think we are here. So let me remind myself to turn off my own phone. Okay, is that showing up for everyone? Cool.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yes. Excellent, excellent. Okay. So again, I just want to kind of start by thanking everyone for joining us this morning in this conversation. And I wanted to certainly turn up as a conversation. I think that works out best. And I know we're looking at conversations that raise your practice game. So I hope I'm instrumental in just sharing something this morning that will prompt thinking, and of course open to questions. And this won't be exhaustive at all, but certainly just to give you an idea of what it's like for me in a practice day. So I'm going to talk again, as Tom shared, about Community Wellness Institute, which is an LLC. And pulling out from that, we have three core programs and services: consulting, we do workshops and training, and we also do research. So today we'll talk about the Face of Justice workshops, which is one of our core services and has been pretty successful as we've moved along. So I like to add a quote most of the time, and pretty much all of the time that I'm presenting and sharing my work. And I found this one, and I kind of look, and I always look for something that resonates with me in terms of who I am, my approach to teaching, research, and practice. And so this particular quote is from Shirley Chisholm, or Representative Shirley Chisholm, who shared, "If they don't give you a seat at the table, as you can see here, bring a folding chair." And this has always been my little mantra ever since I can remember. I've served as an executive director, but I started my career in the nonprofit sector as a receptionist, actually. And I always had this desire to move from that position to one where I had more influence and could participate in making decisions, particularly for vulnerable populations, and with a focus always on African Americans. And so this reminded me so much of being able to, or not really having the opportunities unless you were in a position to have a seat at the table where, of course, like I said, decisions are being made. So I included that quote today.
Hey,
Jerry.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, but there's a big black box. that
Okay.
we can't see past to see the whole slide.
Okay.
Oh,
so
it's
is that-
gone. That's beautiful. Perfect.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. And so, oh, I see. Okay. So if I pull up notes, then that's the black box that comes up. Is that, I'm thinking that that's what's going on.
That's definitely possible.
Yeah, for my, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to do it this way then. Let me put the presenting with the notes. Now, do you still get a black box? Hold on a minute. Do you get a black box this way? This is coming up for me. Are you
Yep.
seeing the black box?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, again. All right. Let's move that out the way then. Okay, let's do it this way. So I've got some objectives. We are looking at what I want to accomplish today is just talking a little bit about the work of community wellness and how did I get it established? You know, where does that actually come from? Tom mentioned the acronym FACE, and we'll expand to that a little bit more. We'll talk about workshop topics and formatting. What does that look like for me? And sort of give a rationale of why, and then a couple of marketing efforts. Future, or I do want to talk briefly today about connection to current times and as well as future goals. And then, of course, as Tom shared, we'll do a Q&A. Okay, so Community Wellness Institute is sort of the brainchild, well, is the brainchild of a colleague and I who for approximately 3 years, we visited Starbucks, or we would meet at Starbucks, and we pretty much brainstormed. So I want to include that because it did evolve that way. And it wasn't just something we thought of. We kept having conversations. In fact, it was 3 of us. We kept having conversations around what it is that we wanted to do. And we knew, of course, my colleague is a industrial org psychologist, I community psychologist, and we had another colleague or another friend working with us. And so we knew we wanted to do something interdisciplinary. That was part of the conversations we had. And so, you know, I'll make a really long story short. So approximately maybe about 2.5 years, we decided, okay, you know what, let's do wellness. We were interested in what that looked like from a holistic perspective. And we, out of these conversations, the conversations we had, Community Wellness Institute was born. We knew we wanted to influence change, which is our tagline, and of course, impact communities as in an interdisciplinary way. So workshops and trainings we do, I mentioned earlier, I've done workshops for Federal Home Loan Bank. These are just some of the constituents or some of the clients that I've had. This is Oakton. I've done workshops for Oakton Community College, Adult Ed, CETA, Public Allies, and I do workshops for my church that I attend, which is a multicultural church, which has really become interesting in the light of this current prevailing social issues of police brutality and racism, etc. We also provide consulting services. I have 2 things up here standard, just in the simple way of working with smaller nonprofits, of working with for-profit businesses, and again, multicultural congregations or churches. And we're working on a virtual incubator, which is, we were looking at doing it in an on-ground capacity, but of course, COVID had us starting to think about how do we transition that business model to something more sustainable, just in case something like this happens again. And so now we're looking at what a virtual incubator might look like. And we also conduct social research. Our most recent study that we completed just about this time last year was historical trauma. We looked at historical trauma among African Americans, very much interested in it as race-based trauma, of course, and then the implications on contemporary populations and what that might look like. So here's our acronym, including the image that we are in the midst of getting copyrighted or just about done with that. But as Tom mentioned, We look at fairness. Fairness for us is bringing about either supporting balance if it's already there, or bringing about balance if it's not there. And most times it really is not there. And so, we look at it from that perspective. Awareness, we're very much interested in awareness when it comes to ensuring that voices that have been silenced are not no longer silent. So we look at that piece within that. Compassion is huge. Compassion for us means engagement, not avoidance, but engagement. And then we look at excellence and we try to strive for that in all we do. So hence the FACE workshop stems from this acronym, stems from our core values. And we also have a blog called The Face of Justice as well, that if you visit our website, you can find it there. I also have it on my signature block where it can be accessed. So we'll move into just a little bit about the FACE workshops. These are 6 there? With other 5 workshops that we typically provide, that we typically facilitate. Implicit bias, microaggressions, as you see, let's talk about race. There we do a cultural sensitivity, or the power actually of cultural sensitivity. And then most recently, since we finished our study, we also do recognizing historical trauma. And historical trauma can be, well, I should say it is used or synonymous with intergenerational trauma, although it can really mean something different, but it can be used there. And so we've been asked, of course, to do workshops around recognizing trauma and what does that look like for students and other populations. So with COVID, we expect 19 happening and identified as trauma, we do expect to do more of that in the upcoming months. And other means that we will, of course, come in and work with the client to customize workshops around topics that we feel we can assist with. Client acquisition. Fortunately, and this is great, we have our first workshop, again, I think I mentioned, was a development workshop, or professional development workshop we were asked to do actually for CETA. And again, fortunately, from there, we have used word of mouth marketing mostly to gain other clients and to do other work. And so that's been actually great. I specify here working with clients on content because as a psychologist or community psychologist, we understand that we're not the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side, so to speak. And so we really work with clients. And I know sometimes workshops may be done from the other end, where you go in and you bring the content, or you say, this is what I'm going to do, if they give you the topic. But we typically will go in with the clients, we'll sit at the table with them, we'll work on content really together. I will certainly suggest what I believe is so, or what will make for accomplishing the goals that the client is looking for, but we will definitely work with them on that. And that also includes images. I've had clients say, no, that's not working for me in certain graphics or, images on slides, and I will work to take them down and to make sure that the client is an equal partner in the work that we're doing. Our workshop formats, I'm going to typically introduce the topic. I'm going to, add some language or narratives to that. We'll do breakout sessions, and they have consisted of naming, asking the participants to name when they've been microaggressed. And this is if I'm doing microaggressions, for example, or whether or not they've microaggressed someone, so that we are not just giving information out and in that way, but we are ensuring, of course, that this material that we're giving and this information is applied and understanding. So we do those workshops in the sense of making sure that we can translate theory or move theory to practice. The important thing that I also do is we call it the face package. And the face package typically will consist of slides where you can print them if you're going to print them and put them in hard copy, but we just put them online. And this is where your attendees can take notes and follow along if you're doing a PowerPoint. So we include that on there. We also include, though, if we're partnering with someone or consulting with someone, we will put their information on this online package as well for marketing for them. So it says two things. These are our partners, but it also gives them that marketing that they're looking for, and they've also gotten responses from that. So that's worked out well. This next slide is showing the cover. We'll do a cover such as this, and this was the Recognizing Trauma workshop. This was for actually Oakton College, and they were looking to help create safe and brave classrooms. So we'll include my name or whoever the presenter is. We will include, for example, it has need tech help. The technician, if the person is needing, somebody to step in and take over remotely on their computer, which is one of the great things, and try to help them with that. So a cover could look like this. This is just an example. This is an example of this initiative called Real Men Talking. This is someone we're working with collaboratively, and this is a mentoring program and for African American youth. So this is just kind of typically what will go in what we call our face package and look like exactly what the partner or the client might want it to look. Lastly, well, the other thing, let me share this. The other thing I will include in the package is a online survey link to SurveyMonkey, because you can, of course, do so many of them or get so many responses without charge. So that's been great, and they could click right on that link as well. So, we've been forced to more or less move into doing more things electronically or online. And one of the things that is great is that the online surveys like that, while they have this up, they can just go ahead, click the link, do the survey. This that you're looking at is also fillable. It's not showing it here, but the client can just fill in their name and print it for their own use, as well as, for their own purposes. So that's worked out really well. And I've gotten responses from it. For one, it's right there in front of them and they're able to do it and click submit. And then I can determine what that impact of that workshop would be on that particular client. So let's talk a little bit about and I'm not going to really delve into this, but I will share just a little bit about, our connection, our work. We've always done the work on like implicit bias, microaggressions that speak to social and racial justice, but they've become particularly relevant at this point. As we all know, we are dealing with the impact of George Floyd's murder and the impact of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. But this is just now. Police brutality and the racism and anti-Blackness against African Americans has always gone on. But in particular, I want to bring up police brutality and implicit bias because research has demonstrated, and I think New York is one of the police departments who went through implicit bias training for their officers. But there's always been this well, it's not anecdotal. This is actually research. There was a study done where there were targets of unarmed Black Americans and white Americans, and through taking them through this particular practice, it was known that white police officers would shoot the unarmed Black men before they shot white Americans. And so from this, they did gather that there was some type of implicit bias going on. And this is relative to crime and Black African Americans. And so with that, you know, we're asked to do implicit bias still. And we want to stress, or we do stress, that even though implicit bias has been found that it's so and that it's relevant, we do stress though that it doesn't, it's not, you know, we may have somebody say, well, if it's implicit bias or it's unconscious for us, we don't necessarily know what we're doing, and so to speak, but that is not a justification for harming people to that end. So we do stress that. We look at it as information, and part of our framework, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but part of our framework is awareness, and around Freire's, this is pedagogy of the oppressed, position on consciousness. And so what we're attempting to do, we always have this umbrella, and what we're always attempting to do is raise the level of consciousness and develop critical consciousness. And so our point of implicit bias is not to say, or delivering an implicit bias workshop is not to say that this is an okay thing, but you should be aware that this could be going on, and is going on, as research has shown. It's very difficult, though, to move from or to unlearn implicit bias. As we know, we've all been socialized in such a way that ideologies and et cetera are embedded. This is just not a surface thing that's going to go away tomorrow. But at the same time, there's not exoneration for saying, you know, this just happened or this popped up and I unconsciously did that. And when we move to talking about our work, CWI's work, and COVID-19, two things come up. And one is that it has been identified, and rightfully so, as trauma. And what type of trauma we're talking about, primarily in trauma in general. And it's also relative to historical trauma, because it's not just impacting individuals. Historical trauma impacts communities. And so COVID-19 has done the same thing as well. Now, when we look at the social construct of race, when we discuss, or our workshop entitled Let's Talk About Race, that's the framework that we typically talk, well, we do talk about it in, is the social construct of race, and not race as biology. Because when we hear people that say, well, Black African Americans are dying at faster rates of COVID-19, what it brings up for most people is blame the victim. This is William Ryan's 1971 point. And it does not bring up the underlying root of stress and discrimination and racism as stress, where of course we know that if your immune system is diminished in any type of a way, you certainly are more prone to have something impact you most negatively than it would. And so the underlying root is missing from that conversation. I have included the Atlantic, this is an article, this is Kendi's article, and Kendi is the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist. I put this here, and I'll put it in the chat, or you can contact me to get it. But it's a very interesting article that supports what I'm talking about, because when we talk about the social construct of race, we're talking about the race designations change over time. There's nothing static, or nothing static about it. And we're not talking about, it's not a biological one. It is cultural. It changes when it needs to be, etc. And so, you know, we make sure, and so our work, again, my point is that it's always been connected to this the current social issues of the time. So takeaways here, having shared all of that, I want to leave is step one, and how we get to where we are, and how we get to be consistent in what we're doing in terms of helping to advance social and racial justice, is I understand my own framework. Where do I come from? How do I approach my teaching, my research, and my practice? And they're all from the same space. They typically don't, well, they don't variate. I am a Kendi fan. This is How to be an anti-racist, Kimberly Crenshaw, a Black feminist, Freire, as I shared, pedagogy of the oppressed in terms of consciousness, and Martin Barrow, actually, liberation psychology. So I have that, and I understand that, and I always again come from there. And then that moves into the core values for CWI, and that's congruent. So I'm not grappling with, well, are we on the right page, or do we accept this client and not? If I stick from that, such as when you think about always going back to policy, you have something standard that you can use, and then that's the foundation for all of our work. Future goals, we're going to stay the course. We know that we're on the front lines. We know now more than ever, although we've always known it, has just become a little bit more visible now with this prevailing social issues of our time now. We will continue to do that. We will continue to reach out to help other nonprofits and for-profits as well as faith-based organizations to step up and to be where they want to be in this movement and in helping to advance social and racial justice. So there's not too much difference between where we are and where we're headed. So thank you so much. I think I did that in pretty good time. It's, this is our information. We're always looking to partner, to do research, to work with others, collaborations, name it, call us. We'll get in there and certainly bring to the table whatever we can, whatever we are doing to help in this movement. This is our information. And again, I'm not going to leave it up here too long, but you always know where to get me, because I'm probably always in some fight or another. So yeah, I'm not far at all if you need any information from me, but I appreciate everybody so much. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen and we'll come on back to the main room and let's have a little conversation, and I'll try to answer anything that I can to the best that I can. Thank you much. Okay. Yes.
So we're not going to do this through the chat box. We're just going to put out the questions directly
Let's just talk. Yep.
to Jerry.
Yes. Any questions?
Well, let me ask, in this period of time where the anti-racism thing has gotten really big and police departments and everybody else are being pressured to say, I'm with you. How do you sort out a real request from somebody who's being forced into asking for this kind of work, so they can say, I got Jerry, I'm okay?
Oh, Tom.
Was that bad?
This is a tough one. It is so tough. I tell you, I am not doing very well in this space. And I'm not doing very well in this space because I keep asking this question. And I'm going to respond this way. I keep asking the questions, why now? What's going on now? What has happened? This has been going on 400 years. I'm being, where have you been? What is this? I looked at BMO Harris, just an advertisement. We use the bank for our CWI. But I looked at the advertisement and it shared, we're going to be off today, actually. They're going to be off at noon today for Juneteenth Day, right? And so this is their support of Black African Americans and this anti-Blackness, anti-racism movement that's going on. But then I said, what? I just, it's hard. It's hard for me to fathom that it's not just surface stuff that's going on, and that all of this hurrah is going to fade out when everybody fades away again and just not be there. I hate it. I wish it were so. And I don't know that it's not, but I think that it's, I don't think it's okay not to jump up and say, oh, we've arrived, we've overcome. I I don't get it. I keep coming back to where were you? Why is it? It's so, for me, it's like you did the crime. You're only speaking up because you were caught. I keep having to think about, had the situation with Floyd and Breonna and Ahmaud never occurred, where would we be? Now, there's hope. Don't get me wrong. I'm not hopeless. I'm not a hopeless individual in my thinking, but it is hard, Tom, to fathom that there's real meat or there's real substance behind it. We're talking about economy here. We're talking about millions of dollars. We're talking about Americans' capitalistic platform, its position. And to that end, everything goes for the bottom line. So it's hard. It's hard. Um,
I
yeah,
appreciate
it's
that
hard.
answer.
Yeah, my honest gut, my, and not that I won't, again, not that I'm hopeless, not that I don't think that racism can end or that it should end, or maybe it's ending. It's, you got to walk it every day, you know, and see where this thing is leading us. So, and that's what CWI is work is continuing on with a vengeance now. Well, it was with a vengeance, but you know, with a little bit more oomph at this particular point, having, you know, gone and talked to organizations that are predominantly white to talk about the social construct of race before this occurred. And now, you know, just finding more relevance, not finding more relevance, but just the, you know, intensity of what we all, you know, must be moving forward, Ian.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned like the implicit bias aspect of it. We always talk about it from a, let's say, academic kind of perspective of it. And when like people think and talk about race, they often think about like the abruptly clear racist behavior of people when they call people, let's say, racial slurs, or when they're really dismissive of other people of color or black people and African American people in this country. But often, like, it is about microaggression. It is about, let's say, the implicit bias, the hidden meaning, cultural things that have been, like, people been brought into it to behave in a certain way without thinking about it. Anti-blackness, for example, I find it unfortunately fascinating in a sad way that we still have it in most cultures and we don't think of it twice as if there's something wrong with it. We just act upon it and it is part of us. So definitely we need to work not just like with white people, with a lot of communities of colors too, about this kind of topics concerning the hidden things, the prejudice, the racism, the anti-blackness that we have, of the things that we don't notice and we don't understand. Like, a lot of people say I'm not a racist, and I get it, but in the same time, our own culture, our own civilization as itself, it is everything about racism. So, and then plus capitalism does not help at all with this stuff, so it makes it even worse and worse and worse. So
Yeah, I agree. I was looking at, you know, I teach a diversity and individual differences class, and it's really been profound, of course, because my students are predominantly white. I may have a couple, you know, folks of color in there, people of color in there, but interestingly, it you know, they do understand when I share, we've been socialized. You know, this is a socialization process that doesn't just begin yesterday. You know, we are raised and this way. You know, we are raised to such a degree that we value one culture, one ethnicity, and devalue another. And you know, the bottom line is, you it's, you know, when you think about Bandura's social learning theory, right, everything just isn't, again, explicitly taught. You know, we have to remember we're picking up so very much from the social learning perspective versus this way, you know, everything isn't just right, or, you know, everything isn't just outright said. For example, and I'll give you a great example. I have a little 2-year-old grandson, and he attends a daycare center. And so my daughter and I were talking one day, and she said, you know, interestingly, he came home one day and either hit her hand or something like that, something to that, and did like this. She has never hit him before, never done this. And I said, interesting. I said, he saw somebody did that to him, right? And of course, she did find out that the teacher had hit his hand, whatever it was, and did like this, And so I said, there you go. And I was talking to her about social learning theory. I said, everything isn't explicitly said. Everything isn't that vocal like that. And so, we don't understand that, and we don't know that until your child comes home and, models this, right? And so that's how embedded this process, this socialization process is. So yeah, Rami, it's huge. It really is. It's huge. Any other thoughts, questions?
Gary, this is Erin.
Yeah.
So much. For those who don't know, Jerry and then other members of Sarah shared so many resources with me and taught me so much over the past, I guess, 2 years that I've used as a lecturer with undergraduate.
Ooh, excellent.
Charlotte. So I've been thinking about you a lot, especially over the past 2 weeks. I'm teaching summer community psychology.
Mm-hmm.
I have some non-traditional students. Some are, I'm 34, so some are older than me, some are quite younger. And then I thought it was interesting when you were talking about teaching a class that's majority white. My classes at UNCC typically reflect the local Charlotte demographics. So I looked it up to make sure I got it right. So we have 42% are white in Charlotte, and then 35% identify as African American or Black in Charlotte. And that's pretty much what I see. Sometimes, like this semester, community psychology attracts a more diverse group. So often, as a white person, I would be in the minority within my community psychology class, which I love. And I've obviously tried to really educate myself as much as possible so that I can facilitate these conversations. So a specific question that I have that came out of your presentation was, I assume you're talking about doing workshops with adults. So I obviously have this developmental range.
Got it. Okay.
So when you ask them about microaggressions and you ask them to provide that example in either direction, oftentimes I will tell my students things like, I'm so grateful that I went to a public high school. I transferred to a public high school where I got to know people who were not white, not Catholic. I went to a white Catholic school to that point. I'll tell them, I'll never forget the first time I asked one of my teammates if I could touch her hair. I'm like 14 years old. I'm a white girl. I did that. So I'll tell those stories and I'll try to model that, but I've never flat out asked my students to share. And I'm just wondering, knowing me, or if you don't know me, right? And I am very honest and open, I'm a white person. This is my privilege. This is what that looks like. But if you were sitting in my class, I just wonder, is that a type of technique that you think you could utilize with undergrads? Have you ever done that? But again, recognizing that my position is very different. I understand that.
Let me be clear. So you're asking me, so you're saying, so I may use an example of when I was 14 and touched somebody's hair, or touched a Black African American person's hair and found out that was pretty much not the thing to do, kind of a thing. And so you may share something like that. So with your students. So what's the question again regarding, I just want to be clear on the question.
Yeah. I heard you say that in a workshop, you flat out ask them, have you ever done something that now you realize is a microaggression?
Yes.
And what is it like to be on the receiving end of a microaggression?
Right.
I worry if I ask that, especially if it's a young African American or Black student, and I'm asking, tell me about when this happened to you. I worry. So I try to model those things, but I don't typically, when you talk about them applying this, I don't typically force that, or I guess force is strong, but I don't directly ask that. But I wonder if that's necessary for them to really start to understand.
So I think one thing that's important is the audience in the microaggression workshops I've done are typically white. So that's one thing, right? Because I think this is Sue is the theorist here. Well, Pierce, of course, coined microaggressions, but Sue did, has done a lot of work on it. And pretty much, I think the consensus is around it being a racial situation, right? Or a racial incident coming from whites or other people of color, to other Black, indigenous people of color. So it's not necessarily around whites to whites, although that can happen though. Don't mistake what I'm sharing here. And so number one is I'm asking it to that particular population, but it's after I give a conception of what it is, right? And so that's triggering, oh, I have asked somebody, where are you from? Or, oh, you're right. I have said you're so pretty for a Black girl, right? That comes up for that particular population. And so, they're there to understand it, because the whole topic of the workshop is microaggressions and why they matter. And so I'm adding in, if you're trying to build relationships, that's a prohibitor or an inhibitor, to building strong relationships with people of all cultures. So they're there for that purpose. And when they see it, and I'll give examples of what microaggressions are. Some of the typical, like I shared, oh, you got into Harvard, as if somebody of color could never go to Harvard, right? And so when you looking at it from that framework, then they're like, oh, oh my goodness, I did say that, like you said about touching hair. They may say, oh, no, no wonder that was not a good thing to do. And so it does trigger, they're triggers, and they appreciate that. So if you're looking though at a class of Black African Americans or other people of color, then probably the position is not asking them, have they ever microaggressed, but have they been microaggressed? Does that help? Is that, I think, maybe what you're asking me? If not, you can certainly pick my head. But yeah, so I'm not going to come from a space of who they've microaggressed, but they have likely, and I believe research will back it up, been microaggressed, right? In that way, like you were sharing about touching the hair, oh, you're so pretty for a Black girl, or how did you get into Harvard, or, you could go down that list. That's a litany of microaggressions that, oh, the elevator, where you're getting in an elevator and you're an African-American male and the white person holds their purse, close to their chest, those kinds of things like that. So to that end, those students have, I would bet, more than not been microaggressed, right? So versus when did you microaggress somebody? Does that make sense and helpful?
Yeah,
Erin?
that's so helpful. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
the part of my concern is I don't want it to be a microaggression that I'm like, hey, tell me about this happening to you.
I don't
I see that you're
necessarily,
not white.
no, I don't necessarily think that's going to be a microaggression. And in particular, if you're trying to understand, to me, authenticity just is the key to everything. It's like, hey, I'm really trying to understand this, give me some real facts here, right? Other than what you may be, humility and authenticity is I think goes very far in really when you're really trying to get more knowledge and to understand it from the lived experiences of somebody, right? So that's my take on that. And certainly this is a conversation. If anybody else has anything they want to add, I'm open to that, please. Vernita, I think you.
So I'm Erin, thank you so much for sharing that, because it put it back on my radar to think about that, and to and then the different SCRA iterations of meetings and things. We've been having more honest conversations, and one of the revelations we came to yesterday in the practice council with Rami was that we don't, it seems like across at least the United States, we don't have opportunities to have just genuine, honest conversations where people just tell what's really going on. We were trained to talk about where we're from and what we're doing career-wise, and to talk about other people and their issues, our neighbors, whatever. But we don't, and maybe it's the confrontational part I think we also touched on, but we don't have a space where people can just share their narrative and then be believed and really listen to attentive listening, you know, so people aren't like taking notes or looking around or doing other things. They're just looking at that person, sitting quietly, allowing that person to tell their story, no matter what it feels like, you know, and letting them get it out. So we were kind of reasoning that because we don't have those types of spaces and again, I'm just going to speak for America and in American, you know, dialogue, because I believe in some other countries, there's more of a sit around and eat our food and engage like that. So I think that that's why it doesn't come up. And because I think if we heard more of each other's stories, just real honest stories, not always triggered by the racial climate we're in right now, it, you know, we might see that come up. And if you create a space, if you tell your situation and everybody's just given etiquette prior to the class, right? And then just allowed to speak, I think it might work, because it's been working for us, because it's just such a relief to finally say the things judgment free. Nobody gets judged. You just get to talk and then go around the room. And I think you might find that like Jerry was saying, that people might be more willing to just see it, because if I had not heard, and even the things that both of you were just saying, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That's a oh yeah, that's a microaggression too. I'm like, the elevator, right? Yeah. Cause when I worked, this is years ago, I worked in a corporate building. So it was about 30 floors. And when I would get on the elevator, because I had read something about how Black men, when people come on, when a Black man comes on, people move over. So I started doing that with the white male corporate guys when they would get on the elevator with their, you know, briefcases and stuff, and they've got their phones in their hands, and I would step over in the corner and clutch my purse and look down, and they would be like, hello, how are you? Are you okay? And it was more of a social experiment for me to see if they could see what it felt like for somebody to be terrified. And I did it all the time, and you cannot believe how uncomfortable they got, how apologetic they were, trying to chat me up, and so they don't like it either. But now the choice for us, I guess, is to say, now imagine that's what you do, and show people when we do it to each other, right? Because that's when it really comes home. And I didn't have the wisdom or the, you know, understanding to then call them on it at that time, right? I just did it to see what their reaction would be, and they were very uncomfortable too. So I can't imagine being a Black male and having it every day, all the time.
And the other thing, Erin, is in my syllabus, I will share what I'm doing in there, you know, is to offer a different lens, etc. So they get it right, you know, up front, right? My teaching philosophy and what I'm doing. And so I can build off of that from there. And so you might want to include that in there, as I'm here to, you know, also gain more knowledge about the lived experiences of other cultures too, you know, etc. So I think, when we level that playing field, you know, when we look at Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed, you know, and move away from I think Vanita has a point about moving more into authentic conversations, then, you know, it becomes less this. And so, you know, students aren't afraid to share, and they're more open to giving you the, you know, what they've got. And I think that is
and Jerry, would you say that that the learning is probably deeper then, because like you said, it is social learning, and we are experiential beings, you know, we still have that animal instinct to try to watch and learn and sort of
interesting. I think so. Interesting you should say that. Actually, not this semester, last semester, I had a student email me and said to me, you know, he said, I respect your thoughts about, you know, your philosophy, et cetera. He said, and I'm glad you respect mine. He said, I will never think the same again. And I, you know, this was one of my reasons. I said, okay, you know, this approach is a good one. He says, I'll never think the same way again about anything. And so, just that different lens and that expanded lens versus this, versus that, right? You're just trying to expand somebody's worldview, yeah. So I think that's a good
And
point.
you know what I was thinking this morning? It pulls us out of, again, the dialogue that we have in our society where we're always blaming something or being mad about something, and it turns us back into what I think humans are best at, is being proactive, creating, collaborating, right? So right now we're in we're still in a blame society, finger pointing and trying to assuage guilt, but those natural dialogues seem to, because I think that's when we're the best, when we're in our classes, right? And we're learning because we're open and we're willing to challenge ideas. And then somehow when we get out of those environments and into corporate or practice environments or academic environments, it's easy to start then, looking at everything that's wrong instead of really allowing that full circle of thought, process, and conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm
Thank
glad that
you. And yeah, please, Christine,
I'm
another
I'm
question.
glad that, I'm glad that you said that, Vernita, and this conversation to me is very enlightening. Part of the challenge I have is this whole issue around safety, because all of us walk in, I don't know how to put this, it's like a series of overlapping circles in a Venn diagram. You've got to figure out who you can really trust and who you don't think you can trust, and where you feel safe, because every single one of us at some level is being evaluated, be it by a colleague, a supervisor, a person who has a project they'd like to ask you to join on, and they're trying to think and feel you out to figure out if they should or not. And so I think what you said, Vernita, is spot on, that having that honest conversation, but that level of honesty for all of us, I think, is a certain level of vulnerability. And figuring out when you can be safely vulnerable or not, particularly in this kind of environment where I think we're hopeful that we might be able to build some bridges, but we don't want it to come back and bite us. So, and in the same environment with students, they're also in the same situation with classmates who at times they're competing with. And so it's I don't know how to put it. And there's so many ways, unfortunately, that we've been taught to marginalize and rank order with power dynamics and everything else. It's really complicated.
It's complicated. Yeah, I agree. And I don't know who was on the call. Christine was on the call for the panel discussion for the MPA. The MPA conference, the little virtual conference that they had. I know Christine, Vernita, you probably was on there too, and a couple of other folks. But anyway, it just reminds me of what Erica Mingo shared, was about, not really caring what people think about us, more so she mentioned something about, we always get evaluated. I think that came up in this conversation. And so, I think her platform, her position really was, well, who cares, whether you're getting evaluated by what, or who's calling you what, and so forth. I think it was around the word thugs or something to that end. And so moving in that space is really helpful, right? When you are not so much concerned about what, and say this is a African-American, Black African-American, white perspective about what people think about you. And that could be, Rami was sharing any culture actually, or ethnicity. I think we care way too much about what some other culture thinks about us, kind of a thing. But again, I'm not diminishing socialization and what that has meant, though, in terms of turning into action, negative action as well. But the same token is kind of moving away from that too, for all of us, basically, caring more about the well-being and wellness, hence Community Wellness Institute of the folks, right, of our people that we care about. So
unfortunately,
Tom, I think,
we've come
okay.
to the end of our time. And the conversation's been amazing, because what we were really hoping to do, and you led us so brilliantly to this point, is have people talk about exactly where we went, which is, okay, we get the idea. We know we should do this. Here's some ways you do it. And then you do it. And you get into all the trouble that you get into and all the difficulties and all the internal and external conflicts. And I'm delighted that we were able to put that out on the table,
Yes.
because that's where the work is. And that's where we learn the skill of being a practitioner. So great thanks to you, Jerry.
Yes, I appreciate
everybody
being here.
who
Thank you.
participated. And as I said, the next one is July 10th with C.N. Wilson from Wilfrid Laurier, Research as Community-Based Action for Black and Indigenous Lives. And she does amazing and very interesting work up in Canada. So thank you all.
Excellent.
And,
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Jerry.
everyone.
Bye.
Yep, see
Happy
you soon.
Friday.
Thank
Happy
you so much.
Juneteenth.
Thank
Happy
you. Yep.
Juneteenth.
Yes. Take
Yes.
care, everyone.
be well,
Yeah,
everyone.
Thanks,
okay.
Jerry.
Yes,
It was a great
you're welcome.
webinar.
Thank
It
you
was
for
quiet,
coming.
but I
Thank you,
enjoyed
Susan.
listening.
Thank you much. I appreciate you being here.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Tanya, Rami,
Thank
Megan.
you so
Jack.
much.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you, Jackie.
That was great.